Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to the highest point of every state in the USA. So this is, I wonder, this is going to take into account mountains and things like that, right? But not every state is going to have mountains in there. So states like Kansas, I think, other states within the Tornado Alley, which are known to be quite flat states, what are going to be the highest points in those states? Just monuments, buildings. But yeah, I love these kind of videos. I'm quite a big fan of geography and just random questions like this, and I'm sure quite a few are as well.
The United States is a country of vast diversity, with just about every landscape and climate represented in its 50 states. Some states, like Kansas, have a reputation for being flatter than a pancake, which is true, by the way, but so is every other state by the same comparison. Some places, like Colorado, are famous for being mountainous wonderlands.
Right.
It's become a noteworthy travel bucket list for ambitious sightseers to visit the highest point in every state. So, what are these places, and where are they found? Let's go through each state's highest point, in order from lowest to highest elevation.
I'm guessing the highest will be, what's that? The mountain in Alaska. What's it called? Is it Mount Pleasant? Oh, God, what's it called again?
Florida holds the title of the lowest high point of any state, found at Britton Hill. At only 345 feet above sea level, it is just a small hill off the side of a small road.
Really. Yeah.
Delaware's highest point, the Ebright Azimuth, is just 448 feet above sea level. It's also just a few feet away from the state line with Pennsylvania in a grassy field among the Wilmington suburbs. There's really nothing of interest here. At least Florida's high point makes a big deal of itself. This is just a vacant lot.
Interesting.
Over in Louisiana, another low-lying coastal state, the highest point can be found in the northern part of the state, Driskill Mountain. At 535 feet, it's really just a hill set among some other rather hard-to-notice hills in the forest. Neighboring Mississippi has a similar high point, Woodall Mountain, with an elevation of 807 feet. Again, it's just one hill of many found in the very far northeast corner of the state, near the Tennessee River.
Is there a threshold for, like, the minimum height to be called, like, a mountain? You know, or can you just call anything a mountain? Like, or is there, like, a minimum?
Returning to the Atlantic coast, Rhode Island has Jeremoth Hill, an 811-foot hill about a mile from the border with Connecticut. Not much to see here once again, as it's barely noticeable in the surroundings. The first inland state to make the list is my home state, Illinois. Despite being notoriously flat, Illinois does have some hills in the northwest and southeast. Charles Mound, the highest of these, is the first high point on the list with over 1,000 feet in elevation. At 1,235 feet, Charles Mound is on private farmland bordering Wisconsin in the far northwest part of the state. Next door neighbor Indiana has a very similar high point, Hoosier Hill, just a couple miles from the Ohio border. It too is on private property, and it also has a very similar elevation to Charles Mound.
Because, I mean, look at this. So this is almost twice as high as the mountain that was mentioned like a few states ago. But this is called a hill, whereas that was called a mountain.
At 1,257 feet. We head one state over again to Ohio and its highest point, Campbell Hill. This one is found in the town of Bellefontaine with an elevation of 1,549 feet and is home to the aptly named Ohio High Point Career Center, which is a technical school for adults. Continuing this string of Midwestern states is Iowa, which is home to Hawkeye Point. At 1,670 feet, it's a couple miles from the Minnesota border in the northwest of the state, and it features a very cool mosaic and signs pointing to the other 49 state high points.
Cool place to take a photo. Like, I'd stand like right, but I probably wouldn't stand on it, on the mosaic. I'd probably stand on the edge here.
Missouri brings us the first high point that is actually a mountain of sorts, Tom Sauk Mountain. At 1,772 feet, it's not that tall, but it is found in the St. Francis Mountains of the Mark Twain National Forest. We return once again to the coast with New Jersey's high point, named High Point. Great job, New Jersey, always bringing that innovation to the table.
Very creative name. How did they come up with that? My goodness.
At 1,803 feet, High Point is found within High Point State Park in the far northwestern corner of the state. It's the most grandiose of the high points we've seen so far, as it features a 220-foot tall obelisk on its top.
Quite cool.
It's back to the Midwest with my friendly neighbors to the north, Wisconsin. Their high point, Timms Hill, is at 1,951 feet in elevation and is found in the hilly wilderness of northern Wisconsin. It has an observation tower at the top. Heading even further north to the UP, Michigan's highest point is not too dissimilar to Wisconsin's. Mount Arvin is at an elevation of 1,979 feet and is part of the Huron Mountains.
Okay.
Across Lake Superior, in the far northeastern tip of Minnesota, is Eagle Mountain, with an elevation of 2,301 feet. It's set among the rugged and beautiful hills of the Superior National Forest.
Cool name. Cool name. Eagle Mountain. Sounds very, macho.
Connecticut's high point is a rather interesting one, as it's located on the southern side of a mountain that reaches its true peak in Massachusetts of 2,454 feet. In Connecticut, the high point is at 2,379 feet and is located about 1,000 feet away from the tri-points of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York. In Alabama, Cheaha Mountain at 2,413 feet is the highest point in the state. It's part of the Talladega mountain range and appears to be much higher than it is due to its prominence.
Still very high, 2,500 feet. I mean, that's a solid. That'll take you hours to get to the summit. It wouldn't be easy.
Arkansas, perhaps the first state of the video so far that's well known for having mountains, has its highest point at the 2,753-foot peak of Mount Magazine. Although it's very close to the Ouachita Mountains, it's technically a formation of the Arkansas River Valley instead, and is part of the Ozark National Forest.
Ozark. Did you guys watch that show on Netflix with Ruth Langmore? That was a great show.
Similarly to Arkansas's mountainous fame, Pennsylvania is famous for the Appalachian Mountains, which are home to its high points of Mount Davis, located near the border with Maryland. Mount Davis comes in at 3,213 feet. Speaking of Maryland, its high point of Hoy Crest is next in line. At an elevation of 3,360 feet, it's found just barely across the border with West Virginia and is part of the Backbone Mountain Ridge.
Okay.
I mentioned Massachusetts a while back, and it makes its appearance now with Mount Greylock. Its elevation of 3,489 feet and location in the northwest corner of the state provides beautiful views of 5 states and is also home to the only taiga forest in the state. There's also a paved road to the top and a war memorial tower at the summit.
Nice that there's a paved, road that you can walk. That's not going to have like a rugged terrain. Yeah. And getting up here, this view would be spectacular. And it looks like it's in a circle, so you can do a full 360.
North Dakota brings us the first high point of the American West, with White Butte. At 3,506 feet, it's set among the Badlands of western North Dakota and is on private property. South Carolina takes us back to the Appalachians. Its highest point, Sassafras Mountain, is split in two by the border with North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and is at an elevation of 3,560 feet. To reach the observation tower, which is on the South Carolina side, visitors have to pass through North Carolina first if they stay on the path. In Kansas, we find Mount Sunflower, one of the more famous high points of the 50 states. It's not an actual mountain or hill or really anything, but just the end of the long gradient of elevation that is the state of Kansas, about half a mile from the Colorado border. Kentucky has an actual mountainous high point, of course, being Black Mountain. It's just over the border from Virginia in the eastern part of the state, and is easily accessible by road. It comes in at 4,145 feet.
How do mountains get their names? Who gets to decide? Is it the first person to summit it? How do they get their names?
Vermont, the Green Mountain State, has Mount Mansfield to claim as its high point, at an elevation of 4,395 feet. While the summit is a destination for high pointers, the mountain is also a ski resort and features some of Vermont's last remaining alpine tundra from the Ice Ages.
Wow.
Moving back south to Georgia, we find Brasstown Bald, a 4,784-foot high mountain peak found in the Chattahoochee National Forest of northern Georgia. There's apparently a shuttle service that runs to the top very frequently. How convenient.
Nice. Very convenient.
West Virginia, an almost heavenly state famous for its Blue Ridge Mountains and Shenandoah River. Its country roads will take you to the place you belong, Spruce Knob, its highest point at 4,863 feet, found just outside the eastern panhandle. In Oklahoma, the highest point is found on Black Mesa, a mesa which just barely stretches into the panhandle coming out of New Mexico. At 4,975 feet, the area is a quite different landscape from what most people think of when they hear Oklahoma. It is a beautiful spot though. Up in Maine, there's Mount Katahdin at an elevation of 5,270 feet. This mountain is found quite centrally in the state of Maine, and is also noteworthy.
Now we're getting to sort of the realms of like, okay, these are serious mountains. Like, this thing looks gargantuan. It looks so big.
As the northern end of the Appalachian Trail. Close by, New York has Mount Marcy, found in the northern part of the state among the Adirondack High Peaks region. With an elevation of 5,343 feet, and not being too far away from Lake Placid, it's a very popular destination in the area and offers great views.
Mount Marcy.
Back in the plains, Nebraska's high point is Panorama Point at 5,427 feet. Quite similarly to neighboring Kansas, Panorama Point has very little noticeable prominence and is found just over the border from Colorado and Wyoming, about a mile away from the tri-point of the three states.
Interesting. So that was like just there was nothing to denote that it was really high. So I'm guessing, what is it? Just a steady, like, incline?
Virginia also has a high point that's not too far from a tri-point. Mount Rogers, at 5,729 feet, is evidence of former volcanic activity in the Appalachians hundreds of millions of years ago. It's in far South Virginia near the tri-point with Tennessee and North Carolina. New Hampshire brings us another famous high point, Mount Washington. Coming in at 6,288 feet, it's found in the northern half of the state and is well known for its extreme winds. The fastest wind speed ever recorded that wasn't found in a tornado or hurricane, 231 miles per hour, was measured at the summit. That's insane.
My God, imagine getting, like, you couldn't walk in those in wind speeds like that. It would be like the Wizard of Oz when Dorothy just gets blown away.
There's also a cog railroad and a vehicle road that climbs to the top. Tennessee is home to Clingman's Dome, a mountain shared with North Carolina in the Great Smoky Mountains. Atop the 6,643-foot summit is an observation deck, and the entire area is accessible by car. Not far away at all, North Carolina's Mount Mitchell lays claim to the highest point in the state at 6,684 feet. It's also the highest point found east of the Mississippi River, and is quite the popular destination as a result. From here on out, we'll be dealing with exclusively western states. Starting us off is South Dakota, with its 7,244-foot Black Elk Peak, found in the Black Hills, just a few miles away from Mount Rushmore. Texas makes its appearance with Guadalupe Peak, found in West Texas in the Guadalupe mountain range shared with New Mexico. At 8,751 feet, there is a hiking trail all the way to the top, with great views of the surrounding desert.
How are mountains made? Like, are mountains basically when tectonic plates meet? Like, because I thought those were volcanoes, or are they the same?
Oregon's highest point is Mount Hood, a quite well-known peak towering nearby to Portland, and the first peak over 10,000 feet on the list, coming in at 11,249 feet. It's also part of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, and is a potentially active volcano itself. Arizona has Humphreys Peak as its highest point, just north of Flagstaff, in the San Francisco Peaks. It has an elevation of 12,633 feet, and offers great views of the surrounding area. Idaho's highest point is Bora Peak, situated in the center of the state among the Lost River Range. Its elevation is 12,668 feet, and features quite a strenuous hike to the summit. Up in neighboring Montana is Granite Peak, found 10 miles north of the border with Wyoming. At 12,807 feet, it's widely regarded as the second most difficult high point to ascend, due to its weather conditions, tricky routing, and it usually takes at least 2 days to climb.
2 days? So you have to sleep sort of halfway up. Oh my God. How do you sleep? Because it looks very, very steep. There's no, like, can someone tell me, how do you sleep in a situation like this?
Nevada's highest point is the 13,147-foot high Boundary Peak, aptly named as it lies just over the border with California. It's technically a sub-peak of California's taller Montgomery Peak. New Mexico's highest point is just barely taller at 13,167 feet. Found at the summit of Wheeler Peak, the area is very close to Taos, and skiing and hiking are popular activities. Over in Utah is Kings Peak at an elevation of 13,534 feet. It's found in the Uinta Mountains of northeastern Utah, not too far away from the Wyoming border. We're venturing away from the lower 48 for the first time with Hawaii's famous high point of Mauna Kea. At 13,803 feet above sea level, it's sometimes considered to be the tallest mountain in the world when measured from its true base at the seafloor. Wow. It's home to many astronomical observatories, is held sacred by Native Hawaiians, and is famous around the world. Starting out the top 5 of this list is Wyoming's Gannett Peak, at an elevation of 13,809 feet. It straddles the Continental Divide and is part of the Wind River Range. Next up is Washington's world-famous Mount Rainier, the 14,411-foot high active volcano looming in the distance near the Seattle region. It's considered to be one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world and is a decade volcano, one of 16 volcanoes designated as the most important to study.
Decade volcano? What? So does it erupt every 10 years, sort of like regularly? That's very cool.
Third place goes to Colorado's Mount Elbert, which is featured in this video's thumbnail. It comes in at an elevation of 14,440 feet. It's the highest point of the entire Rocky Mountain range. Considering its high elevation, it's not a particularly difficult peak to ascend relatively, which earned it the nickname of the Gentle Giant. California and its Mount Whitney claim the second highest state high point with an elevation of 14,505 feet. It's also the tallest mountain of the entire lower 48 states.
Beautiful photo. It looks like the mountain on the Evian. You know the Evian bottles. It looks like the mountain on the label.
Which leaves just one more state left to claim first place.
Alaska, right?
Alaska and its famous Denali take the spot of the highest high point of all 50 states, with an astounding elevation of 20,310 feet. It was known as Mount McKinley until 2015. It's the third most prominent mountain on Earth, and the tallest peak in North America. What an impressive place.
Mount Denali.
And that concludes this look at every state's high point. From vacant lots in the suburbs to towering peaks in the remote wilderness, the USA truly does offer an incredible variety of high points.
Definitely. Great video. It's just, it's so cool how you can go from, you know, a small hill of 200 feet to like something 20,000 feet high. You know, Mount Denali, the view from up there must just be spectacular. Just as far as the eye can see, it, you know, just seeing all of the ice and the sort of ruralness of Alaska from that height must be amazing. It must be very difficult to climb though. Like, I'm guessing this must take multiple days, maybe even a week. Like, I don't really have a frame of reference for climbing mountains. Like, big ordeal to climb Mount Denali. But yeah, what a thing to be able to say that you've done. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoy my videos, please help me out by liking and subscribing.